Okay, this is part two of the Death Tax Repeal Act of 2015. I was just finishing up with this chart here. I think I finished before I got cut off. And now I want to go to the next chart. Okay, this is this chart here is by the VOC.com website. It says here, watch chart, how the rich stole the recovery. Now it says here, the bottom 90% used to see the majority of the income growth during economic expansion. Well, these vertical yellow bars here represent the bottom 90%. These dark blue vertical bars represent the top 10%. Now from 1949 to 1980, the bottom 90% had a bigger share of income from economic expansion than the top 10%. Now that all changed with Reagan. The top 10% here shot past their income from economic expansion here, and it got bigger and bigger. The share of the bottom 90%, their income from economic expansion got smaller and smaller. As a matter of fact, from 2009 here to 2012, their share was negative. Now, the reason for this mainly is the Reagan and the Bush tax cuts on income. Now I'm going to go here to the next chart here. I'm now going to go to the income tax. Back here in the 60s and part of the 70s, the top rate here was 91%. Then it was reduced to 70 here. And in this case, that makes sense, because World War II and the Korean War were over with. But there was a surtax here added of 10% to pay for the Vietnam War, but that was temporary. Then it was reduced back here to 70 during this period here. But look down here. Debt to GDP stayed below 40% in a very safe range. But what happened? Reagan became president. What did he do? I told you before. He lowered the top estate tax here from 70 to 65, and 60 and 55, and he increased the exemption from 175,000 to 600,000. Now that's not graphically shown, but I have the figures here between these double lines. Now he did a number of other things. He cut the top income tax rate here from 70 down to 50. That was his tax cut in 1981. Then he cut it from 50 all the way down here to 29. That was his 1986 tax cut. Well, look what happened. The national debt here shot up. Well, 3 more tax rates were added here to reduce deficits. 2 by Bill Clinton here, back to 39.6. And it stayed at that level during his presidency. But what happened? George Bush becomes president. Does the very same thing as Reagan. As I showed you before, he lowered the estate tax here, which was 55, in increments down here to 45. And he increased the exemption from 675,000 all the way to 3,500,000. Now he also, like Reagan, cut the top income tax rate here, which was 39.6, down to 35. Now, in 2003, he lowered the tax on dividends here on capital gains down to 15%. Now, you see here, Reagan, prior to Reagan coming in office, there was 16 marginal tax rates. And he reduced them all down to 2. So he in effect flattened the income tax rate down to 2 tax rates, 15 and 28 here. Now Bush here, what he did was he turned the progressive income tax into a regressive tax. These very wealthy people down here paid a lower tax rate than the middle class because he reduced their tax on investment income. Now, what happened during Reagan's 8 years in office? He added approximately $5 trillion to the national debt here, same as Reagan. They both promised, if they were elected, by cutting taxes, they would increase economic growth and produce more revenues, but did just the opposite, increase the national debt. Now, prior to Reagan here, the national debt was less than $1 trillion. Do you know what it is today? See this figure here? That's 18 trillion. I just recently checked the national debt. Now it's over 18 trillion. Okay, that's 17 trillion, more than 17 trillion has been added since Reagan here. Now, remember I showed you that previous chart where the income from economic expansion shot past the income from economic expansion of the 90%? Well, they owe back taxes here from these tax cuts because they benefited from these government expenditures. Now I want to tell you something. If a man dies, his estate has to pay off his debts before his assets can be transferred to his heirs. Well, the same principle should apply to public debt. This is public debt here, created during this period. Now, there is unjust enrichment here of millionaires and billionaires during this period because George W. Bush cut taxes during 2 wars rather than raising taxes. Now, another reason there is unjust enrichment here, millionaires and billionaires, is because George Bush looted the Social Security Trust Fund rather than raise taxes. Well, that benefited the millionaires and billionaires. That fund has never been reimbursed. Now, tell you something else. Where there's unjust enrichment here of millionaires and billionaires, Bush reduced the tax on dividends down here to 15%. Previously it was taxed as ordinary income. Now the reason that they'd done that, they said it was double taxed. But that's a partially invalid reason because some corporations, big ones, that pay dividends, they pay little or no tax on profits. Now there's one more principle here, reason I should say, why this is unjust enrichment of billionaires and billionaires during this period here. Over 90% of Republicans have signed the Marquess No Tax Increase pledge, which means they're maintaining tax levels below what is necessary to pay for legitimate government expenses, increasing this debt here. But at the same time, it benefited millionaires and billionaires. Now, therefore, for these reasons, various reasons here that I've given, they owe back taxes. But if you repeal the estate tax, what happens is these estates of multimillionaires and billionaires can tax for their entire estate tax-free to their heirs or recipients. And what they're going to do with this public debt here, that created in their lifetime, that they benefited from, these expenditures, they're going to dump it on future generations who didn't create it. That's immoral. You can't, okay, I'll go to the next one here. Okay, remember I said I would explain the stepped up in basis rule? It's part of the estate tax. This diagonal line here represents unrealized capital gains that have accrued during the life of the decedent, that is in his estate. Well, you would think that when his heirs or recipients inherit his assets, they would pay the capital gains tax. Wrong. These assets or properties are marked up to fair market value at the time of death. His heirs are liable for capital gains from the time of death forward. These unrealized capital gains in the estate are canceled out. No one pays them. Now that's a big tax loophole. I'm going to go to this next chart here. I'm going to go to